This time I'll call the meeting of the Marshall City Council to order with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to welcome everyone here this evening. We have an agenda before us. We'll move to agenda item number 2, which is to consider approval of the agenda. Are there any additions, deletions, or changes to the agenda? Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So move.
Motion by Craig, seconded by Jim to approve the agenda as it was prepared. Discussion, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes. Agenda item number 3. Agenda item 3 is consider the approval of the minutes of the work session of the Local Board of Appeal and Equalization that was held on March 13, 2018, the minutes of the regular meeting that was held on March 27, 2018, and then the minutes of the Local Appeal and Equalization meeting that was held on April 2nd, 2018. So the minutes of all those meetings are in the council's packet. Are there any corrections?
Move approval as presented.
Motion by Craig, seconded by John to approve the minutes of those 3 meetings as they have been presented. We'll move to a vote. Motion passes. Agenda item number 4. Agenda item number 4, Sounds of Summer. This is a required public hearing, and this public hearing is to authorize the private use of the public streets and parking lots for Sounds of Summer. The dates August 17th to 19th, 2018. Call on Glenn Olson, Director of Public Works, City Engineer, to conduct this public hearing.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This is a request for another Great Sounds of Summer for 2018. What we're showing you is the restricted areas that will be closed for the event, and we certainly do recommend the approval of the request. Now, as you know, we have another major project that might be going on at the same time, and that's on Saratoga Street. So we'll have to work around that for the parades and things like that. So we don't see a significant issue with it. We'll be setting up our detours and barricades similar to what we have in the past, except for it might be a little more interesting with the detour coming down Southview Drive all the way to 4th Street. But this is the areas that we're planning to use for the parade routes and the closures for the get-together.
And the areas for use are exactly the same as they have been.
They're
in the
the
past.
same.
Is there any input as part of this public hearing? Is there a motion to close the public hearing?
So move.
Motion by Craig. Second by Jim. Discussion. If not, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes. So the 2 actions here, the first action would be to approve the private use of the public streets and parking lots for Sounds of Summer, August 17th to 19th, as requested.
I move the approval of the request.
Second.
Motion by Craig, seconded by John. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes, and then the final action would be to approve the Sounds of Summer parade route. That will be held Saturday, August 18th, and this is subject to the MnDOT authorization and approval.
Second.
Motion by David, seconded by Jim. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes. Thank you, Glenn. We'll move then to agenda item number 5. Agenda item number 5, questions?
Approve the resolution declaring official intent for reimbursement. Second.
Motion by John, seconded by David. Discussion?
In their bid, I do have a question, by the way. I know last year RNG did a project, and there's 3 projects I'm going right, but there was issues with the landscape. Has that been addressed that as they do this project, that we don't arise with those same issues, so we're going back and forth with them. So when these homeowners get their houses finished, that they have good black dirt? I mean, is that been addressed, so we're not?
Yes, it has, and it will again at the pre-construction conference.
And then my last point, and I know the assessment issue is moving forward, but I'm still opposed to these until we get our assessments figured out. I do know it's getting pushed forward, but I still stand on that. We need to get our assessments figured out before we keep pushing our projects forward.
Other discussion on the motion?
I just have a quick question there. So what if the special assessment policy stays as it is? Would you still be opposed to it?
At this point, we need to decide on something, and I've said that all along. If we vote to leave it the same, fine. It needs to be addressed. I don't necessarily think I'd be opposed to it at that point. We have then addressed the special assessment policy, and it is what it is. But it's something that's been talked about for 2-3 years and has not been addressed. So I'm pushing to get it addressed. If we vote to leave it the same, then we leave it the same, so be it. But then we have a council have made a stand. So
I guess for your information, yes, the Ways and Means Committee met on an initial draft. Some more questions were brought up. We're scheduled to meet next Thursday again. So hopefully something will be back.
Yeah, and I'm aware of that too. It's
okay.
just, I am aware of that. I have to, I've looked at that. And I just want to keep that on the front burner too, so we as a council make a decision on it.
Right, we're hoping that it'll be back for final action next council meeting in 2 weeks.
Perfect.
So it is on the burner.
Good, I like that. Front burner.
Any other discussion on the motion? Glenn, you have a point?
Just with regard to special assessments, we wanted to make sure we do it right. And
Right.
we didn't want to rush into something and find out later we made a mistake. So we are trying to do it as diligently. We're trying to move it along, but at the same time, we want to have a policy that's going to be a good policy for years to come. And so we want to think it through and make sure we do it right.
And I respect that. I just want to keep the pressure on that we do get it done.
But Jim, in tribute to you, is every pot that's on the burner needs to be stirred, so.
Any other discussion on the motion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes. And then the second action would be the resolution that would accept the bid and award the contract and authorize entering into the agreement with R&G Construction Company of Marshall in the amount of $679,458.65 for this project, which is Marguerite Avenue and South Bend Avenue reconstruction.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by David, seconded by Jim, or by Craig. Discussion? Sorry about that. If no discussion, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes. Agenda item number 6. Agenda item number 6 is the consent agenda. We'll bring the items up on the screen on the consent agenda. I'll read them. On the consent agenda is considered the adoption of the resolution declaring Silence of Summer as a community festival, the vacation of the utility easement at Carr Subdivision 1, received a petition for the vacation of the utility easement to vacate and call for a public hearing. Consider declaring public works equipment as surplus property. Consider the approval of temporary on-sale intoxicating liquor license for Marshall Area Chamber of Commerce for an event June 7, 2018. And finally, to consider the approval of the bills and project payments. Is there any item on the consent agenda any member of the council wants to remove for purposes of separate discussion?
I move approval of the agenda.
Second.
Motion by Craig, seconded by Jim. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes. Agenda item number 12. Agenda item number 12 is the Ziegenhagen edition. The action before us is to consider the resolution adopting the final plat. Glenn?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. The plat has been reviewed and recommended for approval, and typically we also have the motion include with the review of the title and attorney's opinion, but that in my understanding
Was not received. No, just having subject to.
Okay, so it will, could I take a look at the recommendation wording. It would be in the recommendation. Yeah. Can I bring that up? Okay. What we usually do is put subject to attorney's review and title opinion. I believe the title opinion was provided.
No, it has not been provided. It's been prepared, but I haven't received
Okay.
it.
So I would recommend approval subject to that review.
Are there questions for Glenn on this or the attorney?
Dennis, is it in order to you then, or the resolution?
Yeah, we need to put just subject to the final.
Add that on there?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Is that clear, Kyle? I move approval of the resolution.
Subject to attorney review of the
Right.
Okay.
Amended.
motion by Craig.
Second.
Seconded by Jim. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote.
It was maybe when you're on vacation. We didn't have a memo.
Yep, subject to
Very good.
attorney review. Very good.
Okay.
Motion passes. Agenda item number 13. Agenda item number 13, as well as agenda item number 14, are related, and maybe the discussion on the recommended action on both could be discussed at the same time. So the action on agenda item number 13, as well as agenda item 14, is introduction of the ordinance. 13 relates to the introduction of the ordinance for the landscaping ordinance and calling for the public hearing that would be held at our next meeting. And the next action would be, agenda item number 14, would be the same action, introduction of the ordinance, call for public hearing for the exterior appearance standard. So with that introduction, Jason Anderson, Assistant Engineer, is here to present and discuss and talk, and answer any questions on the recommendation to introduce.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Well, both of these ordinances, both the landscaping and the exterior appearance standards ordinances, were created in 2014 with direction provided at the time by city administration. The purpose of the ordinances are for the landscaping ordinance to encourage the incorporation of vegetation, trees, and other visually pleasing landscaping elements into the design of new development and redevelopment projects. The exterior appearance standards ordinance, the purpose of that ordinance is to shape the way new developments may look in the city of Marshall, depending on what zone they're constructed in. There's been a building task force that was created, as we all know, in winter of this winter, 2017 and 2018, that was formed in part to investigate issues with building in Marshall and topics that could make building in Marshall easier and maybe less expensive. So these two ordinances are both viewed as ordinances that add cost to local development projects, and were sort of slated by the task force for review. The task force presented recommendations to the Planning Commission at the March 14th meeting. The recommendation for the landscape ordinance was to repeal language included in the landscaping ordinance section A2, B, B1, B3, and D. The recommendation for the exterior appearance standards ordinance was to repeal it in its entirety. The Planning Commission motioned to approve the Building Task Force recommendations to amend both ordinances as was presented to them at that meeting. At the March 20th L&O Committee meeting, the committee discussed the Task Force and Planning Commission recommendations. And with the landscaping ordinance, they motioned to kind of rework some of the language in the ordinance to be less restrictive and maybe a little more clear in some areas, while still encouraging some landscaping standards. The the motion for the exterior appearance standards ordinance was to move it to City Council for public hearing to gather public input. So with that, city staff went ahead and did make some changes to the landscaping ordinance, tried to mirror the suggestions of L&O committee. So that's presented in the amended ordinance. And then what's also presented is the repealed ordinance for the exterior appearance standards ordinance. So with that, staff doesn't have a specific recommendation with either of these items, but the recommendation from planning and zoning is to make changes as per building task force, and L&O asked to rework language in the landscaping ordinance and then bring the appearance standards to public hearing.
Okay. Thank you, Jason. Questions for Jason or input from the Legislative Ordinance Committee clarifying anything? Not yet. Before you, the recommendation to introduce and call for the public hearing.
I move the recommendation based on the L&O committee input that the council introduce the amendments to city ordinance for landscaping and call for a public hearing to be held April 24th.
Motion by Craig, seconded by John. Discussion?
When we have the public hearing, this ordinance can be amended at that time too, also after we get it.
Based on input at the public hearing.
I just want to make sure that we value that input too.
Right, absolutely.
Other discussion on the motion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes. Agenda item number 14. Agenda item number 14 is the introduction of the ordinance that would repeal the exterior appearance standards and call for a public hearing. Again, Jason, you already explained anything more to add?
No, Mayor, I apologize. I thought you wanted those combined, so I delivered those.
That's fine.
That was good.
Yep.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Motion by Jim, seconded by Craig. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes.
Thanks, Jason.
Thank you to the Legislative and Ordinance Committee, the Planning Commission, the Building Task Force for their work on both of these issues to this point.
And this public hearing will be in what, 2 weeks?
Yes.
April 24th.
Our regular meeting.
Okay. Agenda item number 16. Or excuse me, agenda item number 15. Agenda item number 15 is the Michigan Road Superior Road Reconstruction Project. The action before us is the resolution that would receive the report and call for the hearing on this reconstruction improvement project. Glenn?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This project is in the, we call it the Schwan's Industrial Park area of Michigan Road and Superior. A few years ago, we did Ontario, replaced all the asphalt with concrete. That's what we intend to do with this section as well. Marshall Municipal Utilities was a prime impetus in the development of the project because they've been having significant water breaks in the area due to the cast iron lines that are in there. Sanitary sewer as well needs to be replaced. It's clay type material, and both will be replaced with plastic. The engineering department has also been in direct contact with Schwan's for discussions of narrowing the street somewhat. What we're taking a look at is what are the needs for street width and what is the cost difference in making that smaller, because in accordance with our current assessment policy, those street costs, other than what's over the water and sewer, are 100% borne by the property owners in an industrial zone. That certainly could be amended too with this discussion that we've been having with the assessment policy. But no matter what, we're taking a look at street widths to minimize cost but still provide serviceability. They've got a lot of semis. We're expanding or making the radiuses at the intersections. We're going from 25 to 30 feet up and changing those to 50-foot radiuses because of the turning, the duals in the back not being able to make short turns. So those are the kinds of things we're working with the property owners. Also, their water service lines. Most of them are large service lines, like 6-inch main size service lines. So that's one thing we're working with the property owners on. So that's what the intent of the project is, and we would recommend approval.
Okay, thank you, Glenn. Questions for Glenn?
Mr. Mayor? Glenn, is Michigan, is that bituminous or concrete right now?
It's bituminous.
But Superior is concrete, right?
Ontario is concrete, and Superior is concrete up to that area that you see the crosshatch. So that piece coming north past the driveway into their plant, that's concrete, and then it changes to bituminous.
Okay.
And that's what we're intending to replace with concrete, and then it'll continue the same width up to Michigan Road, and then Michigan will be minimized for size, and so will from Michigan north on Superior.
But that'll all be resurfaced as concrete?
That's
okay,
correct.
good.
That's
Thank
our
you.
intent.
Okay.
That portion of Superior was done at the same time as Ontario.
Yes.
I thought, yeah.
That's when that intersection was corrected. It used to be like a pie. Or
Yep, I remember that. Okay, thank you.
John?
Glenn, on that, you're saying minimize the size of Michigan Road. In other words, you're narrowing the road up.
Yes.
And
About 8
side
feet,
of the
I
road,
believe, Jason, wasn't it? About 8 feet
You know which side of the road you're taking it from?
from both sides.
I would probably have you consider taking it from the south side and shifting it a little north if you're accustomed to driving on that road. The shadowing from the ice cream plant
We talked about
does
that.
not melt much of the
Yep.
ice and the snow in the wintertime off that southern half. So the more you can minimize that, shift it to the north, I probably suggest doing that. It wasn't until this last, there was a good week in there, we had a very rough road on the
South side,
eastbound
yeah.
side of that, or the south side of that road.
We also discussed there is some miscellaneous parking on the northeast side, or the north side of the road on the east side of the project. We don't believe that it would be necessary for them to park there. And we don't have a lot of traffic other than the semis, so we have some ability to meander. We're not going to stripe the center line, for instance, because we don't have a lot of traffic meeting each other on that roadway. It'll still be wide enough to meet people, but that parking might be a little more difficult when we narrow it up as well. But cost is a huge factor. It's we're putting 7-8 inches of concrete down. It's a lot of money. So we're trying to work with them to minimize the cost as well.
Any other questions or input for Glenn about this project? If not, I'd entertain a motion on the resolution that would receive the report and call for a hearing on the improvement.
So move.
Motion by Craig. Second by John. Discussion? Now we'll move to a vote. Motion passes. Agenda item number 16. This is the project of Saratoga Street reconstruction. The action before us tonight is the resolution that would approve the plans and specification and ordering the advertisement for the bids. Once again, Glenn.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. We've gone through this project before. It's a total reconstruction project, at least from the river on the northwest side all the way down to past C Street. And then I'll call it fairly minor work from C Street, at least from the corner south all the way to Southview Drive. A couple of items that we've been, again, talking about with the property owners. One is is Schwann's on the reconstruction of the water and sewer on vacated South First Street. That is a fairly significant area of disturbance where they have kind of green space and sprinklers, and we're planning on connecting the bike path from Saratoga Street to the park by Marvin Schwann. We've been working with them on specific locations of where that would work best for them and tie in for us as well. Also we've been talking about the request by the fire department for the replacement of the driveway as well as the access to Saratoga Street, making that transition there a lot better for exiting and entering the fire hall. Mark Claith is here tonight if you have any specific comments or about that, but we have reviewed it with them, and they're strongly suggesting that we try to do something with that transition under this project. They also have a separate project in mind for mill and overlay of the rest of it, but the concrete driveway portion, there's quite a change in elevation from coming down and then going back up on the street itself. They've had some difficulties, and we're working with them on that issue. That's all I have. It's a big project. It's 50 plus pages of plans and specifications. We intend to do it in 2 phases. And really, with this spring, it depends upon what the weather lets us do for what phase to be done first and second. We'd like to do the C Street portion, or from C Street South in front of the middle school when the school is out of session. That's what we'd like to do. Well, we're starting with that, and then we're going to do the northwest section second, and because we were thinking of a lot sooner construction schedule, we kind of flipped them around. Now we're really going to have to wait to see when the bids come in, what the weather is like, what the contractor's schedule might be, what his subs are, those kinds of things before we make a final determination. And that will be generally at the pre-job conference. We will be inviting each of the major players and anyone who wants to attend, really, but major players to that pre-construction conference to talk about scheduling. But we don't know what that's going to be until that time. So we would recommend approval.
Questions for Glenn?
I don't have a question for Glenn, but it's more for Mark, because I know Dr. Meister brought up the apron at the fire department about trucks dragging. If you could address that, Mark.
Welcome, Chief Claith.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. A little history, that fire station was built in 1979. Our trucks have gotten bigger since 1979. That ladder truck, when it goes out, if you don't go out at a right angle, you'll hit the downriggers because of that approach coming out, because that's a pretty lengthy truck. If we damage one of those downriggers, we're going to have a pretty big expense because it'll take that truck out of service. Back in the day, we had straight stick, we had clutch trucks. Our demographics have changed with firefighters, and so and the adrenaline gets going, and if they don't go out of that station right, the hooks on the front of the truck will hit the concrete. I mean, you have to go out at an angle. Well, going out at an angle with the length of those trucks is not always good either. We should be going straight out and then coming out on the road. And there is quite a bit of hump in that. And the trucks have gotten bigger, I mean, to the point. And so I think it's important that we fix that so we don't do damage to that equipment that's coming out of the station.
Mark, and I know you guys have looked at this too, but if are you talking about increasing the angle from the door to the street, making it a little bit steeper, or you talk about raising the curb up?
A little bit of both.
A little bit of both.
Yeah, a little bit of both.
Because the angle, if you drop the angle down at the door apron out to the street, are you going to have a problem with some of the tails as you back in? Is there going to be an overhead clearance? Because some of those have some tight door.
Well, we can't. We've got to be careful how far we go out and adjust that angle, because that ladder truck, there isn't.
Right.
There's only probably 10 inches of clearance or so. I mean, we've talked to Kim and Jason, and we're working on to make sure that that angle is correct on there.
You don't have the ability to bag dump or anything on those trucks as you go? I mean,
No.
they're fixed?
They're fixed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions related to that? I have a separate question mark, but
Well, I say, so your drivers have done a good job of not dragging, because that's what Dr. Meister said. He doesn't
Well,
see
and if you
drag.
go, if I can take you down there if I have to,
I
you'll
just- I
see
was
where they've hit.
complimenting
I mean,
your firemen
yeah.
for not dragging the trucks.
Well, and yes, they've done a good job, but somebody's been coaching them along very well.
we thank you for that.
Not to do damage to those trucks, so.
Well, we appreciate that. So, okay, that answered my question. Thank you.
so in my question mark, and I know we haven't exactly talked about this before, so I apologize if I'm springing it on you, but I've wondered, we're on a busy street there. Is now the time? Is there a need for any type of a warning beacon to warn traffic as they're, coming around that corner so that
Well, I know
trucks
that
aren't
you're,
impeded?
they're going to be adjusting corner.
Right.
We haven't had any problems. Those trucks are pretty lit up, and when they leave, the sirens are glowing, so we've been fortunate. I think when they adjust that corner, that'll help too. Coming from the other way, I mean, it's pretty visible when we're coming out of there.
You light them up when you back in, too?
Yes.
Yep.
Yep.
If in fact there's something we can do with lighting or signage in that neighborhood, I think we should. So if the fire department wants to come to us and we discuss that, I think that's a good idea. Because I don't think we're going to be wanting to change this for the next 30 years either.
Right.
There is some some communities that have, when the doors open in the station, there's a light that comes on that says the fire trucks are exiting. I mean, I've seen that too, so that could be a conversation that we could have.
Right, that's a good idea.
Okay. Any other questions for Mark, as long as he's standing up here? Related to this project.
I have some other questions, but I've been asking him for years.
Okay, thank you, Mark.
I move the resolution, Mr. Mayor.
Motion by Craig, is there a second? Seconded by David. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes. Agenda item number 17. Agenda item number 17 is consider the resolution authorizing the execution of the MnDOT construction agreement for the city maintenance of sidewalk and lighting. Glenn.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. If we could bring up the map, that would help a lot. What the agreement is for operation, not there.
Which one?
Oh,
Have a map.
probably that one. It's probably at the end of it.
All right.
MnDOT, of course, is looking at putting in right there. J-turns at the intersection of Lion Street and Trunk Highway 23, and that's kind of just the layout of that intersection with the area, this area going down Lion Street, and this is the other side. Anyway, there's a few sections of sidewalk here, some that don't hook up to anything, but this, for instance, is our bike path, and they're connecting that at this time for a crossover and another ramp on the other side. I would tell you that this probably won't be used, and when people come across here, they'll probably just go down the roadway on the other side. But what the agreement is for, it's for the operation and maintenance of those sidewalks.
Do we even want to encourage bikes to cross Highway 23 at an uncontrolled intersection?
Probably not, but if we ever want a connection, now is the time to put them there. So that's the discussion, is if they get installed for connectivity, it's not a bike path extension, it's a sidewalk extension. But it would be for pedestrians to cross at that location.
Whether it's uncontrolled, there's no...
It's uncontrolled.
I think that's a bad idea, because cars are zipping along here at 60 miles, 65. I know the speed limit's 55, but cars are zipping along at 65 miles an hour, and we're close to a school there.
There's no problem with us recommending that they not be installed.
I don't mind the north-south part.
Yeah, the other part makes sense.
Yeah, where the bike path is.
Yes.
Yeah.
But the T and the Z is, I
They're-
don't like that.
They're easily removed.
I would make a recommendation that we remove those and keep the two on
And enter into the agreement.
the, and then, yes.
And the other one is the lighting. We have to have an agreement with them as MMU will be servicing the lighting for us after installation. We actually normally provide them with the poles and they do the installation under their contract. And we actually install the heads as well. So that I would recommend that we approve.
And I would include that in my recommendation, but I would take out the cross 23 and the Z.
Okay.
That's a motion. I'm with
That is a motion.
Motion by Jim, seconded by Craig. Now we'll allow some time for discussion on the motion. And Kyle, do you have the gist of that motion?
Is that going to be changed with a new contract, or is that going to be amended to the current contract?
I will contact MnDOT directly and see which would be their preference. But however we do it, it'll come back with what the council intended. I think what they did is they reference an exhibit,
Yeah.
and then the exhibit would be changed.
the agreement 1030363.
Okay. I think everybody clear on this? Okay. Any other discussion on the motion? If not, we'll move to a vote on the motion. Motion passes. Agenda item number 18. Agenda item number 18 is board liaison reports. Actually, mine have not met since we last met. The Fire Relief Association does have their quarterly meeting next week.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Library Board, I believe, met last night. I missed it. We were doing interviews for fire chief position. And the Amateur Sports Commission, I had to be honest with you, I've had a pretty full plate. I think they probably met today and I missed it. I think I have to look. And the Emergency Communications Board meets later this month. That's all I have.
Okay, Glenn?
Public Housing Commission met yesterday, and they're getting a new HVAC system for their 8-plex on East Main Street, and they had 3 local firms bid on it, and the bids turned out pretty well. They were substantially lower than the architect's estimate, and the lowest 2 bids were only about 1% difference between the 2 low bids, so they were real happy about the results of the bid process. The other thing, I think at a previous meeting I mentioned the fact that they were looking at possibly purchasing the washers and dryers at Parkview Apartments because the person who owns them was thinking of selling it. Well, the person who owns it decided they're not going to sell it now, and so, but the Housing Commission still receives a substantial amount of income from the use of the washers and dryers, and I think if I'm reading this correctly in our budget, there's under other laundry, there's about $4,500 a year in revenue coming from the laundry area, so it does help out as far as the budget is concerned. That's my report.
Thank you, Glenn. John?
Mine did not meet, but you should have received an invitation from MMU for to attend the next meeting and the review of the audit. You received a copy of the audit tonight.
Okay, thank you. David?
Mine have not met since our last meeting.
And Jim?
Mine have not met.
So then we'll move to agenda item number 19.
Mr. Mayor, point of order on the MMU audit. Do we need to be concerned about having a quorum there of the council, correct?
No, it is a...
Because it's an advertised posted meeting. Okay, thank you.
It's a posted meeting.
Okay, thank you.
So John, will there be a meal?
No, they actually stopped doing that for an election.
Okay.
They do have water.
Okay.
But you can carry it.
So very good. We'll still move on then to agenda item number 19, council member individual items. Jim?
I have a couple of them here. I visited with Glenn Olson about this one earlier, and he said he's addressing it. It's the water sitting along Main Street. That's part of it as we talk about assessments is the quality of work. I understand Main Street is not something the city is in control of, but it's still the perception from our community members, why are the storm drains higher than most of the puddles? So, and Glenn is aware of that, and he's working with the state to try to correct that. The other things I have is this last weekend, I attended the hospice ball at the Red Baron Arena. And I just want to give kudos to how that was done very well, and it is a beautiful arena that we had it in. And it just turned out well. And then on Sunday, it's, as we talk about local stuff, is in our local, we went from adult entertainment to the beats program that the local high school put on. So there's a lot of fun things that happened this last week in Marshall that folks, you don't have to run out of town to see a lot of fun stuff. It's right here in town. So I want to give credit to those folks who put that all on. So
Very good. Thank you, Jim. David?
A couple of items. We had, let's see, last week on the 3rd, a informational meeting for landowners, both residential and commercial, that were in the area affected by the consideration of the change of covenants for the Parkway 2 edition. And Steve has talked about this a little bit before, but it was useful information to get an understanding of what's being contemplated there. On the 5th, we had Ways and Means meeting. Maybe John will have something to say about that. And the item from that was in your packet tonight. Let's see, the Ways and Means Committee, well, let me get to that. We all were dealing with the recent snowstorms, and particularly the wet, heavy, thick stuff, and the challenges that our street department faced in dealing with those. And probably you all had some constituent contacts on that. I had several, and I, working with Steve on a couple of them in particular in Ward 2, wanted to note Glenn and Dean Kudrin and Sharon working with us on getting the particular localized situations resolved, and some consideration of how we can in some way spread out some of the burdens that come with the timing of when things get cleaned, and perhaps a rotation scheme. So thank you for your attention to those issues. One other item which involves Ways and Means, I've mentioned this to Glenn and John, my colleagues on Ways and Means. There was a discussion, I was reminded this started last year with the discussion I had with Carla, our finance director, about getting more clarity about the city's bond obligations, the amounts, what they're for, when they expire, and so on. And we got a good start on a platform that posted that information on the website and potentially in other forums. But then an outgrowth of that is from discussions this week about an item that will be coming, as it turns out, to Ways and Means next week, to consider bringing back the Abdo Ike firm to take a look at our long-term bond structure and make some recommendations about how we restructure them and maybe control some of the costs with them. So that's something we'll get into in some detail next week, and then you all will see it here at a subsequent meeting. That's all.
Thank you, David. John?
I think you covered most of it here. The rest of it we talked about just a little bit earlier. Glenn brought up regarding the assessments, and the newspaper had a good article in there covering this. So much more than that.
Okay. Greg?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to say that I know that the snow removal stuff has been challenging both for the residents and for our street department, Public Works, and I just want to say that I do appreciate how quickly they get at it and try to go, and I know how tough it is, and I want to keep encouraging residents, if you have issues, call the City Hall, talk to the Public Works, talk to engineering, and make sure that you let them know if there's a problem. And then speaking about the events at the Red Baron Arena and Expo, coming this weekend is the Camper and RV Show, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and it looks like that's going to be a real decent thing. The weather's going to be a little tough possibly this weekend, so a darn good reason to stay in town and spend some time out at the Red Baron Arena and Expo. And heck, you might even be able to rent skates and skate sometime on the other sheet, so on the Lockwood sheet. So I think it's a good time to go out there and enjoy it. So that's all I have.
I appreciate the comments about the hockey arena. And I know Craig has said before that there are people from out of town that compliment us on the arena, and I wish they had something like that. I think one of the things you can tell them is that the city of Marshall spends about $1.5 million a year for that hockey arena. About $1.1 million is in debt financing to pay for the construction, and about close to $400,000 in operating subsidy. So it does come with a cost. It's not a free facility. You know, it takes about $1.5 million in sales tax and food and beverage tax to help pay for it and operate it. And the Merit Center too, it's about $500,000, I believe, per year that goes to pay for the debt on that Merit Center and for operating subsidies. So there's a cost to both facilities. And so if other cities want to do something like that, they just have to convince their city council to spend $1.5 million for a hockey arena.
Well, and I would add to that, though, first off, it is a expo center and arena. A lot of the events that were described here, have nothing to do with hockey, but it is a facility that you are absolutely right is supported by the voter authorized sales tax on half-cent sales tax on retail activity and the food and beverage tax. And the food and beverage tax was specifically authorized by the legislature and the voters to provide the subsidy, recognizing that these types of events do need to be, or venues do need to have a revenue source so that they aren't a burden on ad valorem tax or the property tax. So you are absolutely correct on that. Any more?
No, that's fine. Thank you.
Jim and Craig mentioned this past weekend activities there. Craig, you mentioned the boat and camper show. The following weekend, I think the Avera Medicine Bowl is there. Prior to Easter weekend, Easter weekend there wasn't an activity there, but prior to that was the Marshall Radio Home Show. So, and 5 days before that opened, there was ice on there.
Yep.
So I think the staff there have really done a nice job of turning this facility so it can transition from ice to the events. And that's a tribute not only to our maintenance staff that are there, led by Preston Stedenrud and Cody Malentine and his other staff that are there, but also to Darren Rahm from Convention and Visitors Bureau, who has really worked hard to on the scheduling of everything that is there. I'll make a further comment about, as mentioned about snow removal. Sharon and Alex and I had a discussion earlier about, just information about we've had multiple challenging snowstorms and information about how that is scheduled, and had the opportunity to be at a MnDOT meeting a week ago and shared there that the city of Wilmer, through their public access television, has done kind of a short YouTube info video on snow plowing, and I know Alex has plans to do some kind of, I'll call them behind the scenes, what our city street department staff actually is done, and in that case in the city of Wilmer, what goes into operating a snowplow, all the way from the safety preparations to control of the various blades and the hydraulics and the actual all the mechanisms that are there. And it is a difficult and challenging job, and it goes on for 12 hours. They don't leave until they're finished. So.
Alec, is that going to be kind of like micro and dirty jobs? Are you going to suit up?
Yep.
I'm going to watch that.
So anyway, we could share the one from City of Wilmer because it's,
Sure.
Other than the color of the trucks and the people in the trucks, I mean, it's the same. They're going around garbage cans and they're going around parked cars and their mailboxes, and they're getting the streets cleared, and it's really a well orchestrated thing. And I know it's, this past weekend it was on a Sunday, and the previous weekend it was on a Saturday, and I had probably the same calls you all had. That
And we had it on a Tuesday.
Yeah, it hasn't been snowing for 5 hours, and they haven't got to my street yet, but and that's frustrating for people. But I know our crews, did the best and do the best, and I think we should be proud of them. So.
And on a further comment on that, and I agree with you, when the snow is that heavy, it takes longer to move.
Oh, yeah.
You just don't throw it off the street. It takes longer to push, and it's hard on equipment. It's hard on pushing, and it's just hard to do.
I have two other items. This past, or actually this coming Monday, David, you correct me on this, is the application deadline for all of the corridors for commerce. And of course, there was, David, you were instrumental on some leadership on that through Marshall Area Transportation Group on several of the projects, the total projects, and Glenn helped me on this. There was like close to 400 projects around the state, and it was like, I don't know, $8 billion of projects that were
173
funded
in
out of
outstate.
$400 million. So,
Yep.
so there is on the 17th is the day that everything is due, including all of the resolutions of support, and following that, the 8 points of evaluation will be done by MnDOT staff. And Glenn and I were told that within a week or two after the 17th deadline that they will publish that on a website, and so we will know, and everyone will know which projects are funded. So it's
And maybe a little explanation of the $200 million for outstate, the $200 million for the metro area. That $200 million, you're going to have a score for each project that was submitted. And that's what's going to be publicized. They're going to have all of the scores, all of the project, all of the scores, and then estimate costs of them. And so what they're going to do is, they're going to fund them by number. Okay, so let's say the top 15 projects get funded, let's just say. But when it comes down to the bottom, and you've got $10 million of the $200 million for outstate left, and the next project on the list is for $30 million, that one gets skipped. And they keep skipping down the line until the project brings it within $10 million. So understand how the process goes. At the bottom of the list, there's going to be some projects that are skipped, could be skipped, because of the amount of funding that's left. So a couple of projects at the bottom might get funded even though they have fewer points. So just so you understand that it's going to be by points until they run out of money.
So they're legislatively mandated to follow the criteria in that that evaluation criteria. So the short story long is there's a lot more projects that have been proposed that will be funded. There's going to be a lot of good projects that aren't going to be on the list. There's going to be some disappointed parts of the state and people in the state that have worked very hard on very good projects, but there simply isn't adequate funding.
There's significant support for extending it again, but that's not been addressed. So it's just what it is today, right now.
The thing that I have is, and I talked to Councilmember Schaefer as the liaison to the Merit Commission about this earlier, we have an inconsistency between our ordinance that governs the appointment of the Merit Commission board and the operations of the Merit Commission and the bylaws of the Merit Commission. And that I won't go into all of the complexities of that, but there's significant inconsistencies that truly need to be straightened out. So today, I and Kathy Lee and Jasmine DeSmet, the director there, and Rob Yant met and went compared to line, and I believe that we have ironed out a lot of those inconsistencies, and that will go to the Merit Commission at their next meeting, which is in May. And then following that, their recommendation on the changes to their bylaws, as well as the recommendation to our ordinance that will come to the City Council, probably to our legislative ordinance meeting sometime either late May or early June, for action after that point. So, and that, this impacts like who who is appointed as an at-large member, who is appointed representing an organization, who is representing a occupation. So with that, that's all I have. We'll move to agenda item number 20, which I believe is staff reports. Sharon.
Mr. Mayor and Councilmen, just one follow-up to snow removal, and specifically to Councilman Sturrock, because I know a resident had contacted you and Councilman Meister. I actually did speak with this individual this afternoon and told her that I haven't had an opportunity to sit down with Glenn, but we'll schedule something here tomorrow or the next day. And I've also spoken to 2 other residents over the course of the last 3 snowstorms about snow removal, and I don't know how they are when they first call into the city, but when I talk to them, they just kind of want consideration. And the one individual that contacted Councilman Sturrock, she has ADA requirements. Unlike most of us sitting up here, she doesn't have 4-wheel drive. And so, just to kind of hear their stories and how snow removal personally affects them, I think is really important for us. Even though we have routes and staffing and timing and all that, it is good to get perspectives from them. And for all 3 separate occasions when I've talked to residents about snow removal, they've been really gracious and understanding, and it takes time, and we've got a lot of streets to take care of. So it's a good experience to thus far to follow up with them. So I just wanted to point that out as well. And then secondly, the only other item I have, and it was a memo, as you see there, and I think it was in your packet, is to reschedule the April 24th, 2018 conveyance of land, which would be heard at an HRA public hearing, and then also the TIF District 5-1 public hearing. The resolution specified April 24th, 2018. However, we did not post the notice, so we still have time to not carry out the resolution, and this is a result of the need for our planning commission to amend the comp plan to fit the use of the proposed TIF district. So that needs to occur prior to the council approving the TIF project and the conveyance of land. So right now, if all things fall into place with requirements and information requests, we're looking at a tentative date of May 22nd for the public hearing, and we will ensure that obviously the notice is properly posted and published, and then make you aware of that new public hearing date. But I just wanted to make you aware it won't be April 24th as originally adopted per resolution. That's all I had, Mr. Mayor.
Sharon, John reminded me, and maybe Glenn can talk about this, there is a MnDOT open house for the bridge projects, and that is Thursday. You want to talk about that when it comes to you?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Any other questions for Sharon?
Is it Thursday or
Wednesday? Wednesday.
Tomorrow night, correct?
Yeah, correct.
Okay, so I'll let you announce that. Glenn?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So a couple of things. We'll start with the bridge projects that MnDOT has. Several of you might have gotten a postcard that indicates this public informational meeting that's going to be held at City Hall at the old council chambers tomorrow. I believe it starts at 4:30. I'm not positive the starting time, but 4:30 I believe. And it's just an informational session where people can come in and talk and see what's going on. But specifically, those projects, one of them is by Freedom Gas Station. That one will be a reconstruction project, both for lighting, the retaining walls, and the bridge deck. And the other one is on Highway 68 out by the channel, and there will be a detour set up for that one. We haven't seen a specific detour for the other one because I think their intent is to just close it and have people go around. So it's something that we'll be listening to what their schedule is. They also might get questions and might talk about, it's not scheduled for this meeting, but the J-turns on Trunk Highway 23 will certainly come up in conversation of the scheduling for that. And that one is scheduled for this summer as well. Some safety money being used for that reconstruction of that intersection of Lion Street and 23. We also got notified by MnDOT of the 2019 J-turn project that they're suggesting at County Road 7 and Trunk Highway 23. So while those are separate projects from the discussion that's going to happen tomorrow, I think there'll be some interest in that. So, any questions on that? I have a couple more things. Specifically, we've had several questions concerning the condition of Main Street from College Drive to Hy-Vee. And there are a few areas along there that are significantly deteriorating in, I'll say, small to medium-sized problem areas. And so I will be writing a letter to them specifically indicating the issues that have been brought up to us, noting that it certainly is their responsibility for operation and maintenance of that section. We also have another significant spot of concrete deterioration at the intersection of 4th Street and Main Street. It's just a real localized spot. Looks like maybe a base failure or maybe even a concrete failure in that specific area, because sometimes when you pour concrete in sections and they're fairly thick, maybe you didn't get adequate compaction of that concrete when it was placed. We don't know why, but it is what it is, and it needs to be fixed. So there are some sections along there. I can address the drainage questions. We have an intersection, too, that's got some ponding on the intersection, and I think we'll just bring it to their attention and see what their potential fix and timeline might be. That's all I've got.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Glenn, on the bridge project by Freedom,
yep.
You said they think they'll just close that and let people go around. They're not going to establish a detour, and that will be completely closed, or will they close lanes and do half the bridge?
My understanding is it's going to be completely closed. They won't be having traffic going through there at the time. So that's something that we will be discussing with them. What is the situation of traffic control during that time?
Because, I mean, we certainly don't want semis going up to Marshall Street there and turning left and going to, and then trying to make
right.
little dog, I mean, because if they don't mark a detour, that's what's going to happen.
Right.
We're going to have trucks dead end, and then, or they'll not know and they'll turn right and end up on First Street back by Casey's. And I mean, that'll turn that into Malfunction Junction. I hope we're real proactive about that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we don't have a good location to detour them except coming all the way down to Main Street.
Why, that's it. I think, I mean, it would be Main Street to Bruce Street and...
Yeah.
Okay.
It's not a simple situation.
No.
Glenn, how long is that project supposed to take?
It'll take a couple months. Yeah.
Not good.
No, there may be opportunity to open and close during, close it during concrete cure times and things like that. But I would expect to get the contractor in and out in that a 2-month period of time, it's going to be closed.
And I think that really almost begs the fact that, through trucks should be encouraged to just, like coming in on 68 to take the diversion channel all the way around and probably go back out to 23 and loop around. I mean, seriously, to avoid that, there's a number of communities that you drive through that do that for the semi-traffic, and the passenger vehicles, smaller vehicles, not a big deal, but the tractor trailer issue is I think really needs to be encouraged to just do a complete bypass.
We also, though, have the localized semi-traffic that their destination is downtown.
Right.
And you've got delivery trucks that go from, let's say, one end of College Drive all the way to past Western Printing.
Right.
And they're going to have to learn where their best routes are as well. So by setting up detours, you're going to have that destination traffic that's going to be going downtown.
Most of those guys, though, that are here frequent will have that figured out. I'm thinking about the transient that doesn't come here often.
It's just going through.
Yeah, and if we don't give them a path, they're going to be wandering around. And I mean, it's one thing to do that in a passenger vehicle. It's another thing to do it in a tractor trailer. Okay, thank you.
Any questions for Glenn? Okay, Dennis?
Thank you, Mayor and council members. Most of the issues that have been taking a lot of time have been addressed. Special assessment procedures being reviewed, re-reviewed, coming back here soon, the landscaping ordinance issues, and also on the tax increment financing of the various project-specific documents are drafted and reviewed. So, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Dennis. Move then to agenda item number 23, the pending agenda items. Pending agenda items before you. Agenda item number 24 is the information items, including the building permits. Agenda item number 25 is the upcoming meetings. And agenda item number 26 is to adjourn. I would entertain a motion. Motion by Craig, seconded by David to adjourn. Discussion. That will move to a vote. Motion passes. We're adjourned.
Perfect.